This person thought they could keep their feelings manageable around you. And that plan is falling apart quietly. The pauses feel heavier now. The eye contact lingers longer. Even the distance between you feels emotionally loud lately. Hi, my love. Let's get into why this connection started affecting them way more deeply than they expected. The second this person realized their feelings were becoming real, they started controlling themselves around you harder. That's the strange part. Most people think attraction makes somebody move closer immediately. But with this energy, it created hesitation first, because the emotions showed up too strongly, too fast. I keep seeing somebody having a moment with you that looked small from the outside, but internally changed everything. Maybe eye contact lasted too long. Maybe a conversation felt too intimate. Maybe they caught themselves thinking about you afterward in a way that felt dangerous emotionally. And instead of leaning in, they pulled themselves together immediately. Not now. Pull it together before they notice. That's the energy here. Somebody trying to regain emotional balance after realizing they already care more than they intended to. The hiding happened quickly because the feelings themselves arrived quickly. And honestly, that emotional panic still hasn't fully left them. This person does not like how emotionally affected they are by you. That's what keeps coming through so strongly. Around most people, they can stay composed, predictable, emotionally guarded if they want to. But around you, their reactions betray them. Their mood shifts because of you. Their focus shifts because of you. Even your attention or lack of it lands harder than they want to admit. And I think that realization unsettled them deeply because they are used to feeling emotionally self-contained. Then suddenly, here you are becoming the one thing capable of disrupting their internal balance without even trying. Nobody has ever gotten under my skin this quietly before. That question keeps echoing around their energy. And instead of openly surrendering to the connection, they started managing themselves more carefully. But honestly, the management itself is proof. People don't become emotionally guarded around things that feel meaningless. This person becomes hyper-aware of themselves around you. Their words, their tone, their body language. Even silence feels heavier when you're near them. And I don't think you fully realize how visible that nervous, emotional energy actually is sometimes. Because this isn't casual chemistry. This feels like somebody genuinely afraid of revealing how deeply they feel before they know it's emotionally safe to do so. Their reactions around you almost feel physical at times, like their nervous system responds before their mind catches up. They replay conversations afterward. They rethink tiny interactions. And honestly, some of them walk away from time with you emotionally overwhelmed because they said less than they wanted to, but still somehow exposed more than they meant to. Just breathe. Say less. Stop letting your face say everything. But it already does show in small ways. The pauses, the watching, the emotional tension sitting underneath every interaction. This person genuinely attempted to move past what they feel for you. I need you to understand that because their current energy makes more sense once you realize suppression already happened here. They tried distracting themselves, staying logical, focusing elsewhere, maybe even emotionally disconnecting for periods of time. But the strange thing is, the more they attempted emotional distance, the more aware they became of your impact on them. It's like your energy followed them internally. And eventually, they had to face the uncomfortable truth that this connection wasn't fading the way they expected it to. I thought keeping busy would fix this, but their face keeps showing up anyway. That question sits heavily around them because people can outrun attraction sometimes. They can even outrun attachment temporarily. But emotional recognition, that's harder. Once somebody deeply feels seen, emotionally moved, emotionally awakened by another person, pretending it meant nothing becomes exhausting. And honestly, I think exhaustion is exactly where they are now emotionally. You have no idea how much this person quietly notices about you. Little comments, tiny reactions, specific phrases you probably forgot minutes later. Somehow those things stay with them. And it isn't obsessive in an unhealthy way. It feels emotional. Like their mind naturally assigns importance to details connected to you, because internally you already matter more than they openly admit. They replay moments with you more than you realize. Sometimes not even the big moments either. Oddly ordinary ones. The way you laughed unexpectedly. A sentence you said without thinking. The look on your face when you got quiet emotionally. And I think what surprises them most is how naturally those memories linger. I can still hear exactly how they said that one small thing, and it was weeks ago. Because emotionally meaningful connections imprint differently. This person carries pieces of your energy around mentally, even during random moments in daily life. And honestly, that emotional attachment formed far more deeply than they planned. This connection keeps resurfacing in their quiet moments. Late at night, during empty spaces in the day, in moments where distractions stop working. That's why the energy feels emotionally restless around them right now. They can function normally externally while internally still circling back to you constantly. And I need to say this carefully because I don't want it dramatized unnecessarily, but there's emotional frustration here too, because part of them wishes they could reduce what they feel into something simpler, easier, less emotionally consuming, but they can't. I have laid there at 2, am just staring at the ceiling, replaying one conversation. That question has genuinely kept them awake before. Not because they're unstable emotionally, but because they've realized your presence affected them in a lasting way. And honestly, I think they're beginning to understand this connection changed their emotional standards permanently. Things that once felt fine emotionally don't fully satisfy them anymore after experiencing this energy with you. You deserve clarity that matches the emotional depth you offer people. That message keeps coming through strongly here because some of you became too comfortable surviving on emotionally confusing behavior from others. Half presence, mixed signals, controlled affection, and honestly, that has hurt you more quietly than most people realize. This reading acknowledges the connection is real, yes, but it also acknowledges your emotional needs matter too. I got so used to crumbs that I forgot I was allowed to want the whole thing. Some of you feel exactly that right now, and you should. Because emotional maturity is not about suppressing feelings until the other person becomes exhausted guessing where they stand. The reason this point matters is because this person is slowly realizing something important. You are not somebody they can emotionally keep halfway forever. The connection itself demands honesty eventually. And whether that honesty arrives sooner or later, your energy deserves directness, consistency, emotional courage, and somebody willing to meet you fully instead of carefully rationing affection. Even when this person says very little directly, their emotional energy shifts around you noticeably. People close to them may have already picked up on it. There's something subtly different in the way they behave when your name comes up or when you enter a room, more attentive, more careful, slightly distracted emotionally. And honestly, I don't even think they realize how transparent they become sometimes, because emotions that strong eventually leak through behavior, no matter how controlled somebody tries to remain. The second your name came up, their whole face changed, and they didn't even realize it. That internal instruction feels constant around them lately, but emotional tension has a physical presence to it. It changes body language, timing, tone, reactions. And you may have sensed this without fully trusting yourself yet. That strange feeling that something underneath the surface feels emotionally loaded whenever you interact. You're not imagining it. This connection carries emotional weight on both sides, even if one side expresses it far less openly. There was a specific moment where this connection became undeniably real for them emotionally. And honestly, it may have looked insignificant externally. One glance, one conversation, one emotionally vulnerable moment. But internally, something shifted hard afterward. It feels like they suddenly saw you differently, not casually anymore, not temporarily anymore, more personally, more deeply. And I think that realization scared them because it happened naturally instead of gradually. That one moment hit me so differently, and I walked away knowing something had just changed. That's the energy here. Somebody emotionally catching themselves falling deeper than intended. Since then, interactions with you have carried a strange intensity underneath them because they know something changed internally. They can't fully return to emotional neutrality around you anymore. And honestly, that awareness created both longing and fear simultaneously. Because once attraction becomes emotionally meaningful, people realize they actually have something to lose. That's when guarded behavior usually begins appearing around connections like this. This person had a version of life they thought they understood before meeting you. Emotional habits, expectations, standards, maybe even relationships or routines they assumed were good enough. Then this connection arrived and quietly disrupted everything they thought they had settled emotionally. And that disruption feels bigger than simple attraction. It feels awakening-based psychologically, like your energy forced them to emotionally re-examine parts of themselves they had stopped questioning years ago. Everything I told myself I was fine with started feeling hollow the moment they walked in. That question echoes around them now. Because once somebody experiences emotional authenticity deeply, pretending satisfaction with surface-level connection becomes difficult. And honestly, I think they resent how much this changed them sometimes. Not because they dislike you, but because growth can feel uncomfortable when it arrives unexpectedly. You became the emotional comparison point without even trying. And now everything else feels emotionally flatter to them by comparison, even if they haven't fully admitted that out loud yet. This person replays your conversations constantly, and not in a superficial way either. They analyze emotional meaning underneath your words because your opinion matters to them more than they intended it to. Certain phrases stay with them emotionally for days, especially moments where you sounded vulnerable, distant, warm, or emotionally uncertain. I went back and reread that message probably 7 times trying to figure out what they actually meant. They question themselves afterward because they care deeply about how you feel toward them, even if they pretend otherwise externally. And honestly, some of them become anxious over tiny changes in your energy. A shorter reply, a quieter tone, a delayed reaction. Things they'd brush off easily with others suddenly feel emotionally significant with you. That's how attached somebody becomes when feelings are serious beneath the surface. Your emotional presence affects their internal world more than they comfortably admit. Which is exactly why they monitor interactions with you so carefully now. This connection feels like a crossroads, emotionally, not just for them, but for you too, because eventually something has to change. The emotional tension between you cannot stay permanently suspended in uncertainty without affecting both people involved. One road leads toward honesty, emotional courage, and movement. The other leads toward continued emotional management and distance. And honestly, I think this person knows that now. Somewhere inside, they know this in-between place has an expiration date. That realization keeps pressing on them internally. But I also need to say something important to you here. Your future does not depend entirely on whether this person becomes ready quickly enough. Your emotional worth exists outside their timing. That matters deeply. Because while the feelings here are real, you are still meant to choose yourself fully in the process instead of emotionally pausing your life waiting for clarity. The right outcome will never require you to abandon your own emotional standards to receive love. Your presence triggered emotional self-awareness in this person that they were not expecting. And honestly, I think part of what overwhelmed them is that you reflected parts of themselves back to them they had avoided confronting for years. Not intentionally, you simply existed authentically around them. But authenticity has a strange effect on people emotionally disconnected from themselves. It exposes things quietly. Suddenly, they began questioning emotional patterns they used to justify automatically. Settling less. Feeling more, wanting more. I remember thinking my life was perfectly fine until this person showed me what actually feeling alive felt like. That question began after you entered the picture. And I need you to understand the significance of that. People do not emotionally reconstruct themselves because of shallow attraction. This connection touched something psychologically deeper. That's why even periods of silence haven't erased the impact. Your energy became associated with emotional truth for them, and once somebody experiences that internally, returning fully to old emotional versions of themselves becomes difficult. At some point, this stopped feeling emotionally safe for them. That's the best way I can explain the energy here. The connection crossed a line internally where it no longer felt casual, entertaining, or emotionally manageable. Suddenly, there was actual vulnerability attached to it, actual emotional risk. And instead of immediately expressing that openly, they became more careful instead. The scariest part wasn't falling for them, it was realizing how much it would hurt to lose them. That fear exists strongly around them right now, because deeper feelings require emotional exposure eventually. And I think this person has a history of protecting themselves through control, distance, or emotional self-management. But your energy disrupted those defenses naturally. Which means now they're stuck in this strange emotional space between wanting closeness and fearing how exposed closeness makes them feel. And honestly, the more emotionally meaningful you became, the harder it became for them to pretend they could lose you casually without it affecting them deeply. This person already crossed an emotional point of no return internally. That's why the connection still feels alive underneath everything else happening around it. Once somebody experiences emotional recognition this strongly, the feeling itself leaves an imprint. Even if time passes, even if communication changes, even if circumstances become complicated temporarily, I tried to go back to normal, but normal stopped existing somewhere along the way without me noticing. That quiet realization sits heavily around them lately, because your energy emotionally recalibrated something inside them. And I think they've tested that truth privately already by trying to reconnect emotionally elsewhere or distract themselves mentally. But comparison keeps happening naturally, not because they're forcing it, but because emotionally significant experiences change perception afterward. And honestly, I think they're beginning to understand this connection was never something easily replaceable. That awareness is making the emotional suppression harder now because denial becomes exhausting once the heart already knows what it knows internally. This connection did not explode dramatically overnight. It built slowly underneath ordinary moments. And honestly, that's part of why it caught this person off guard emotionally. Because there wasn't one giant cinematic moment announcing everything clearly. Instead, attachment formed quietly, naturally. Conversation after conversation, thought after thought, until one day they realized your presence mattered emotionally in ways they couldn't easily undo anymore. I didn't notice it happening, and then one day I just knew they had become someone I couldn't imagine not having around. That question carries through their energy strongly. And I think part of them still feels stunned by how deeply connected they became internally without intending to, because this wasn't built on fantasy for them, it was built on emotional resonance. Feeling understood, feeling emotionally alive around somebody, feeling seen. Those things create deeper attachment than surface attraction ever could. And now the emotional bond exists, whether they openly discuss it yet or not. The emotional restraint around this person is intense because the feelings underneath it are intense too. I need you to understand that connection clearly. They are not casually holding back small emotions. They are containing something that already feels emotionally powerful inside them. And honestly, I think they're afraid of how visible it might become if they stop controlling themselves around you. There are things I have wanted to say for so long that they've started feeling like pressure building with nowhere to go. That thought keeps appearing around their energy repeatedly. Because once they fully express what's been building internally, things between you change permanently. The emotional truth becomes impossible to take back afterward. And that level of vulnerability scares them deeply, especially if they're somebody used to emotional independence or self-protection. But suppression has limits. Feelings this emotionally alive eventually start demanding movement, honesty, or release somehow. That's why the tension around this connection keeps growing instead of fading away naturally over time. This person carries your emotional imprint long after interactions end. That's the simplest truth here. Your energy lingers in their mind unexpectedly during ordinary moments, driving, working, trying to sleep, hearing certain songs, remembering specific conversations. And it doesn't feel temporary anymore. It feels integrated emotionally into their daily internal life. A random song came on, and suddenly I was thinking about them so clearly, it almost felt like they were right there. Because emotionally meaningful people leave residue behind psychologically, especially when connection feels emotionally unfinished or unresolved. And honestly, I think your absence affects them more strongly now too. The distance makes them notice your emotional impact even harder. Silence creates awareness. Missing somebody creates clarity. And this person has quietly been learning just how emotionally present you became inside their world. That realization is softening something in them lately, because denial becomes difficult once somebody's energy consistently follows you through everyday life without invitation. This person feels emotionally trapped in the best and worst way simultaneously. Best because what they feel around you feels real, alive, emotionally meaningful. Worst because real feelings demand emotional honesty eventually, and honesty makes them vulnerable. That's the internal conflict, exhausting them lately. I keep telling myself to just be normal around them, but my chest does something completely different the second they're near. They know that now. Deep down, they know the connection already surpassed emotional surface level long ago. But acknowledging that fully means facing fear too. Fear of rejection, fear of losing control, fear of not being enough emotionally for the depth they feel with you. And honestly, I think that's the real issue underneath all the careful behavior. Not lack of feeling, fear of what happens once feelings become openly acknowledged. Because once truth enters the room, both people must decide what to do with it. And this person knows emotionally that moment is approaching slowly now. Whatever this person tries telling themselves logically, sometimes, emotionally, they already know this connection is significant. The pretending phase is ending internally. Because too much emotional evidence exists now. Too many reactions, too many thoughts, too much attachment, too much emotional change connected directly to your presence in their life. I stopped being able to lie to myself about what this is the moment I realized how differently I felt just knowing they were thinking of me. That realization feels undeniable around them lately. And honestly, I think they're beginning to stop fighting that truth so aggressively now. The resistance feels softer, less defensive, more emotionally reflective. Which matters because acceptance always comes before movement emotionally. But I want this final point to land somewhere important for you too. Your value does not depend on whether somebody becomes brave enough to love you correctly immediately. You are already emotionally significant exactly as you are. The right connection will eventually meet your depth openly instead of forcing you to constantly question whether the feelings are real underneath the silence. The right connection will eventually meet your depth openly instead of forcing you to constantly question whether the feelings are real underneath the silence. So take what touched your spirit, leave what doesn't belong to your story, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this reading with someone who may need it tonight. If this message supported you, super thanks is always appreciated. I love you, and I'll see you in the next reading.